Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen. Oh my goodness, you know what? I forgot to say Bismillah before I hit record, so we're going to do that now. Bismillah. I'm sorry, I have to do these things. When I don't do it, it takes me 100 times more effort and, you know, recordings to get one recording straight. And sometimes I still forget. Subhanallah, it really is what it is. But yeah, Bismillah, we're going to start from here. So again, hi, Salaam alaikum. Welcome to Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about the fact that making a dua is not always enough. The dua is a powerful tool that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. It's a magnificent tool and it can literally change our qadr. It can literally change our destinies. If we make the correct dua and Allah accepts it, it can even postpone death. That is how powerful the dua can be. Okay, so we know that it's a powerful tool and we know that we're supposed to make the du'as. We know that there are certain etiquettes that are good and rewarded to make when you're, or rewarded if you make during the du'a. We know that there are certain nights of the year where the du'a is more likely to be heard and answered, times of day where these du'as are more likely to be answered because Allah has proclaimed for them to be more unique for people who might wake up when the night is the darkest and He is in the lowest of heavens, so He's closer to us. So we know that the dua is a very powerful tool, and you know, subhanallah, Allah has chosen to give us such a powerful tool and say, use it. You know, that is a very gracious gift of Allah to do, considering, you know, as I'm sitting here and recording, is considering people also just recently re-elected Trump, or like literally just yesterday re-elected Trump to be president. I mean, okay, that's a whole other conversation. I'm not going to go down that route. It is what it is. We're just going to keep it moving for the next 4 years. And I mean, it's American politics. What are you going to expect, right? But it's politics. It's politics. It's a clown show. So anyway, there you had a little bit of my opinions. Okay, so anyway, it's a powerful tool and one that we don't always understand the extent of. We don't understand always the limitations of. We don't understand always every detail of the dua. And yet Allah has said, don't worry about it. Just take it. I'll give it to you. And I trust that you'll do good with it. And I hope you'll do good with it. And that's a wonderful thing. That's a huge trust to be given by Allah. And we use the dua. Oh my days, do we use the dua as we should. Alhamdulillah. So I know you're making your dua. I'm making my dua. People are making dua every damn day. You know, we're all making the duas. We're all out here praying, asking Allah for favors, for blessings, for ease, for patience, for strength, for wealth, for love, for bigger houses, for a faster car, whatever it might be, right? But here's the thing, and I know this can sound like I've had pushback in the past for saying this because people don't want to hear it. But sometimes, even though the dua is a very powerful tool given to us by Allah, the dua is not always enough. Okay, so before you get yourself and your thumbs ready on your keyboard on your phone to like text me a comment about like, how dare you say that Allah is limitless, listen to what I'm about to say first and then come in with your hesitations. Okay, so here's the thing about the dua. The dua is a powerful tool, but the dua is one aspect of the whole. It is a part of a package of being a Muslim, and a Muslim that is favored by Allah, a Muslim that has stacked up some type of favor, good behavior that Allah wants to reward. Okay, here's the thing that I think a lot of people forget, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at your dua, but He will also look at, is this person worthy already for this blessing? And Allah wants to bless us. He does. He always wants to bless us. But sometimes if He looks at our past and He says, this person hasn't shown me any worship They haven't shown me any gratitude. They haven't been willing to, work towards me, learn their lessons. They haven't been good to their communities, their families. Why should I bless them with these things, right? Allah can look at you and say, you're not ready yet. Say, I want to give you this thing, but I see that you're lacking in the understanding of this or in growth in this. And as a result, he might be like, I will give it to you, but it'll come first with a lesson so you can attain the growth, and then the blessing will come and you'll be much better equipped to handle the blessing when it does arrive. Okay, or the blessing how I want to give you the blessing, because you're a little bit off in what you think the blessing should look like. Okay, so Allah can still say this when we're making the dua. Allah does not blindly accept our dua. Allah promises that the duas will be answered, but He doesn't say how. He doesn't say how the dua will be answered. And this is what we need to remember. We need to remember that one aspect, in that we don't control the how of how it's going to be answered and how it's going to come into our lives, but also that there are actual requirements around it as well. Sometimes, not all the time, because the thing is, of course, that we can sit down and we can make a dua and we can have been horrible people, but Allah sees the good intention within us. He sees that in our future, we are going to move closer to Him as a result of this dua being answered. He can look at things that we have no idea about and say, you know what, I'm still going to give you this thing. I'm still going to bless you with this dua being answered the way that you wanted. And that is for Allah to decide when He wants to do that and for whom He wants to do this, okay? But I will also say here that Allah still, I can't say like, it's not my place, astaghfirullah, to say how often this happens or anything like that. But it has been my experience that more likely than not, and astaghfirullah, I'm not trying to speak on behalf of Allah, and I'm not trying to say anything out of touch. So, take this with a pinch of salt, what I'm about to say here. But like, more often than not, Allah wants to see effort within ourselves also. Meaning, Allah wants us to strive also for the thing that we want. So it's not enough always just to say, I want this thing. Allah also says, okay, how badly do you want it? How much are you willing to sacrifice, change, evolve, learn, grow in order for you to get this blessing? Okay, so sometimes He will look at us and say, I'm ready to give it to you, but a part of the test in this dunya is also the striving towards Allah, the striving in patience, the striving to be a good person, the striving towards your deen and maintaining your deen. And sometimes He will use our blessings and the things that we're asking for in the dua as part of that test. So it would be wrong of us just to go in and assume, well, Allah has promised and therefore He will give it to me the minute I ask and the way that I ask it. Okay, now, and that's coming from someone, by the way, who goes in confidently in my du'as. I know Allah has answered my dua. The only thing is, I don't know how He's answered my dua, but I know He's accepted it. That's a promise from Him. But I'm not putting requirements as to how it's going to come, when it's going to come, the requirements from Allah to me in order for Him to give that blessing to me or help me maintain that blessing in this dunya, or perhaps in the akhirah, right? And that's the difference, right? So you can go in confidently, but surrender the things that you are not in control of, which is basically everything, okay? In case you were wondering. So the dua has its limits. That is not to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has limits. Allah is limitless, which is why, as I said, He can still choose to give someone what they're asking for in a heartbeat. Okay, this is also why, if you're thinking about it, sometimes you're thinking about wanting something or thinking about coming to dua and asking Allah for something. But before you even get to your prayer mat, before you get into the dua, the dua has already been answered. Allah's like, no, I'm good, we're good, I'll give it to you. Like, and it is there, just take it, right? You will, if you think back, you will find that there are moments in time where you feel like, but I didn't even ask for it and Allah gave it to me. Before I even sat down and had that conversation with Allah, right? So Allah can still do this because, again, Allah is not limited. He's limitless. He's without boundaries. He's without any of that. But we are limited. The dua has limitations depending on Allah's will in our favor, or however He wants to, look at it, or, be around it. I don't know what the correct verbiage is here, okay? Forgive me. So, what are some of the things that we need to remember? So some of the things we need to remember, like especially, and oh my gosh, okay, I'm just gonna interrupt myself because I want to really make a point of this in this specific situation, because this is where I've experienced the most pushback from people. When I say it is not enough for you to make dua, or it's not always enough for you to make dua for a marriage. Sometimes Allah wants to see you back up that dua. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you know, for instance, that you have a lot of trauma and baggage and psychological issues that could potentially work against you in meeting and connecting and being with a potential spouse, and you're ignoring this and just hoping that someone will love you unconditionally despite everything, then the delulu has reached a level where it's no longer delulu, it's insanity, okay? So sometimes Allah will say, okay, I'm ready and willing to give you the spouse. Like, I have somebody ready and waiting for you, and I'm ready to introduce you when you're both are ready, but I need you also to make a point of working on yourself so you can be a good partner in a marriage, right? So it's not that Allah will say no to your dua. It's not that the dua doesn't matter or like doesn't count. It's the fact that the dua needs to be backed up by your action. It has to be backed up by your strive, your willingness to attain the dua as well. Allah doesn't need this from you. And I say it like with that need. I really want to put the emphasis on that. It's not that Allah needs you to do these things, because Allah is limitless. He can make it happen regardless, okay? But Allah would like this from us sometimes. He would like to see the effort within ourselves. He would like to see us strive. He would like to see us back up our promises to Allah. And we must think of a dua almost also as a promise. It is part of our worship, but it is also it is also considered a promise to Allah. Because in the dua, we are saying, give me this and then I will be happy and I'll be a better Muslim, right? Like, I believe in you so much, but give me this thing. And if you give me this thing, I'll be a better person. And Allah wants to believe us. Of course He wants. He wants us to succeed. But in order for us to be better people and enjoy the dua and be better servants to Him, He also knows that we need to put in some effort. We need to put in some effort, because if He gives us a marriage and we're not quite ready for it, for instance, we're sticking with that example, and He gives us the partner, but we haven't worked on ourselves yet. We haven't worked on our own blockages, our own insecurities, traumas, baggage, whatever. And we go into a relationship and the relationship starts feeling difficult, then we start complaining to Allah saying, why did you give me this marriage? And in reality, Allah didn't give you a horrible marriage. He gave you what you asked for. You were the one who did not fulfill your part of the deal by working on yourself and being a good spouse. That's on you. That is the part of the dua, that is your promise to Allah, that you will take care of the blessing that He gives you, not the other way around. Okay, I want to share an ayat from the Quran. It's from Surah Al-Isra, and it is ayat number 34. And Allah says to us, and be true to every promise, for verily you will be called to account for every promise which you have made. Okay, I'm just going to repeat that. Surah Al-Isra, ayat number 34. And be true to every promise, for verily you will be called to account for every promise which you have made. Okay, so that means on the day of judgment, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will ask us about our promises and we will be held accountable. And guess what is a part of those promises? The intent, right? That's a part of a promise. We're sitting in front of Allah and we're saying, I'll be a better Muslim, inadvertently or directly. It's going to help me become closer to you. It'll make me a happier person. Whatever it is that we say, my life will be easier. It'll be easier for me to come to prayer. It'll be easier for me to fast on Ramadan when I have a husband, whatever, right? Whatever it is that we think, that's a promise, my darling. That's a promise. And so Allah also wants to make sure that you are able to fulfill that part of the promise, because He knows He will hold you accountable to that promise. So if you're asking for a spouse in your dua, Allah doesn't say, okay, khalas. Sometimes he might, but he's not going to say, all the time, like, okay, khalas, here it is. Here he is. He's going to come tomorrow. He might sometimes, but other times, and more often than not, Allah will send a way for him, for us to be able to see what we need to work on in order for the blessing to come in with ease and with abundance and with love and graciousness and compassion towards us, and give us a chance to have a blessing that is beautiful and worthy of having in this dunya, and worthy of us to come to prayer and to dua with gratitude rather than disdain, regret, anger, frustration, whatever else that we might otherwise come to dua with when the blessing we asked for turns out to be a little bit more difficult because we haven't held up our end of the bargain or our end of the promise, right? Allah will hold his end of the promise. Always. That you can count on. But will you? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. Okay? So that's one aspect of it, is that part of the dua is also a promise, like a small promise that you're making to Allah as well. Whether you say it directly or indirectly, there is an element of a promise in there that you're making to Allah, and Allah will hold you accountable to those. Another aspect that I want you to remember, and again, the reason, why the dua is not always the end all be all. If that was the case, do we really think that what's happening in Palestine would be continuing to this day? Absolutely not, because it takes more than just a dua. It does take more than just a dua. And I'm not talking about, that the people of Palestine need to do more or anything. It's everybody else. That's what I'm talking about, okay? Just to make it clear that it's not that the people of Palestine aren't praying hard enough and that they need to hold up an end of their promise or anything like that. That's definitely not what I'm saying. So please don't read that into it. But it's to say that if the dua was simply a question of sitting down and just making it, and then Allah automatically will just give it to you, the world would look very different today. So we can 100% take from that at this point that maybe there are other things to take into consideration, that the dua is relying on more from us, not from Allah. Okay, so from us. So I want to use this example. I've used it before, and it is the shahada. This shahada, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Now, if we as Muslims believe that if we just say our shahada and we believe in Allah, we go to heaven. That's it. That's all I have to do. I just have to believe in Allah hard enough, and I just have to love Allah hard enough. But that's not the case, is it? Because Allah said, say your shahada, become a believer, but also be a good person and pray 5 times a day and fast during Ramadan and donate zakat. And, if you can, go on a pilgrimage if you have that opportunity in your life. There are things that, there are still certain requirements. There are still certain expectations for you to withhold the part of the promise that you are making when you say your shahada. And again, it's not that you say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and also, by the way, I promise from here on out, but it's the promise that is indirectly a part of saying that shahada, right? And that is the promise, again, that you're going to have to stand accountable to on Judgment Day. But that just, again, goes to show that Allah is ready and willing to give us, but He needs to see from us the effort. He needs to see from us this, because it is based on this that He will judge us. So if it was just a question of us making the dua, what would He be judging us on? Where's part of the test in this dunya? So I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to be gatekeeping the dua or whatever. I don't even know if that's the right word. I'm not trying to be mean or weird about the dua. I'm just putting it into perspective so that you don't say, but I've made the dua and nothing has happened. And then at the same time, you're not looking at your own effort, what you could be doing to show Allah that readiness and willingness. And that is more than just the emotional or mental wellness and what's it called, readiness and willingness. It is also your actionable one. What are you actually doing? How are you actually fulfilling your part of the promise in maintaining and accepting this blessing and this dua when it's being answered, right? And I see so many people say, but I've been praying for so many years. And I ask, but what else have you done? Well, what can I do? So much. There is always something to do. Always something to do. So, there was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh my gosh, I really should start taking notes. I don't know if you know this, but like I don't write a manuscript. Like I'm sure you know this because you can hear it in the way that I talk. I don't write a manuscript. Like I'm just like shooting from the hip. I know what I want to say when I sit down to record, but I don't like having too many notes and stuff. I just like to speak on what comes to me in the episodes. And yeah, it makes me more excited to come and speak because there's more of a flow, and sometimes the manuscript kind of feels restrictive. But like right now, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have just wrote a note because there was one more thing that I needed to say, and it just kind of evaded me a little bit. So we spoke about, oh yes, another thing. There we go. Thank you. You were with me there in the process. My process when I forget something is just to continue talking, and then eventually it'll come to me. It doesn't always work. But you know what? Alhamdulillah, it worked today. Okay, so the next thing and the final thing that I want to say is that the dua is also not limitless for us. Again, Allah is limitless, but we're not. So even within the dua, there are limits. Okay, so even within the dua, there are limits. Again, I get the pushback a lot when I speak about this over on TikTok, when I speak into marriage. Okay, I get this a lot here. So if you're one of those people who've heard me speak on this, trigger warning or whatever, but like I'm not going to stop saying it. It is what it is. So you need to either stop listening now, or you need to be like, okay, let me just actually hear what she has to say about this because maybe there's some truth in it. Okay. So there are limits to our du'as. We can't just ask for anything. We can't just ask for anything we want. We can't be like, Allah says, yeah, I'm going to answer your dua and I'm going to like whatever you want kind of thing. He doesn't say that, but like he says, just make the dua and I'll answer it. But we can't go into the dua asking for a real life unicorn ridden by Bigfoot, right? We can't do that. There are limitations. We have to make the dua based on the natural laws, based on the way that Allah has structured us, made us, and made the reality, right? So we have to operate within this. We also cannot make dua asking for somebody to die or, become sick, or something. Like we can't do these things. There are limitations because we cannot be responsible for other people's qadr and well-being and time of death unless we literally take a knife and go at them, right? Like, but we're not in control of this, and so obviously the dua is limited on this aspect because Allah is not going to answer those things. He's going to be like, dude, this is not even a dua. Like, what are you even doing? Okay. So, of course, there are limitations to the dua, not because Allah is limited, but because our world, our reality, our abilities and power that Allah has given us through the dua is limited. And we need to know this. This also includes, and here comes the triggering point for some of you, asking Allah to make someone your spouse. I know. I get it. It's an annoying thing to say. Like, you've got a crush on someone, you've been desiring them for years, all of these things, and you'll think that person's really going to be a good husband for you. And you keep saying to Allah, Allah, make him my husband, please make him my spouse. And then you say all the stuff, like, oh my God, I'm really going to trigger some of you. Then you say all the stuff. If it's good for us, if it's, meant for us, then make it. If it's meant to be mine, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we know the spiel. We know how to say but only if you think it's right for us, if it's good for my deen, if it's good for this, and we're meant for each other, and all these things. We know how to say these things, right? But we're still asking Allah, make this person mine. Allah doesn't do that necessarily. If that person is for you, then Allah will facilitate in whatever ways. But I've seen some of you and heard from some of you. And listen, I'm not judging, but I really would love if this could be the wake-up call that you might have been waiting for. I have seen some of you pray for people who are still married, who, while you guys have been together, they have left you. They have actively said, I'm not interested. They have actively gone out and met another woman and actively become their Naseeb. They have, you know, girls, there comes a point for your own sanity. And I'm just going to leave that there. Just for your own sanity, ladies. Okay? I get it. I get it if I'm triggering you and if I'm upsetting you right now. I get it. It's not the first time I've done that to any of you. So it's okay. It's okay. I'm ready and willing to go there because I'm hoping that if I say it enough times, if I say it in different ways, that eventually you'll be like, you know what? I'm worth more. I deserve more. I deserve to meet someone who knows that I'm the one and not someone who has to go and marry somebody else. And then I still yearn for them and pray for them. And Allah's like, girl, you're not his. I got something better for you. I got something so much better for you waiting. And here's the limitation around why Allah is not going to answer this. Number one, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, could you imagine the world where if all we had to do was make a dua for someone to be ours, pray to Allah and say, I want this person, and then they became ours? Could you imagine that world and what that would look like? Could you imagine the relationships you'd be in with people you did not even like, with people you never wanted to be with? What a horrible world that would be. Oh my goodness. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So of course we can tell and, you know, deduct from that clearly Allah doesn't answer that dua, because then all of us would be in relationships that we were like, why am I in this relationship? Like, I don't even like this person. I don't even understand how I ended up here, because we wouldn't even like them back. But they made a dua. So, you know, you're stuck with it now. They made the dua, right? Allah had to answer it. So, of course, that we can deduct that that's not the case. Another reason is because Allah has given us free will. And this is such a huge part. We have to choose our Naseeb. We have to choose our partner. We have to choose our other half. And part of that choice includes the other person having to choose you. And Allah, while, you know, He might know that you two are really good for each other, if the other person doesn't know that and they're seeking other things, He's not going to go in and change their mind. He might try and influence the person, but the other person still has to choose you. That person still has to make that decision for themselves. It's very much like saying, no, but I know I should be praying. Like, I know that's good for me, but then not praying. You still have to decide to come to prayer, right? Waking up in Ramadan and saying, today is a long day and I've got a lot of things going on, and choosing to fast instead of choosing not to, because we know that the choice, the power of choice, free will is the difference between like the straight path to heaven versus the very windy, narrow, struggling uphill road that most of us have to take, because we have free will and we have to make choices and decisions. And every time we do that, we're doing it based on our free will and what we believe is right. And sometimes we don't make those right decisions. So you might be like, I know that that person would be a good husband for me. Allah might be like, he could have been, but he's not interested. He's just not that into you. Just not that into you. And I can't change his mind because he's got free will. He's got to figure out some stuff for himself. That's just a case of it. That's just a case of it. I know that it can be such a difficult thing for a lot of us to come to terms with and accept, because we're like, but Allah is limitless. He can just make the person fall in love with me. Yeah, but Allah doesn't do that. Again, free will. We are, what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for, but like we are our own person. We make our own decisions. We have a lot more control in our own lives than sometimes we'd like to think, because it's so easy to say, well, if it's written, then it's going to happen regardless. And yes, that's correct. But your choices, your du'as, your actions change things that can happen for you as well. They do. And sometimes they're not going to, because some things are just so set in stone from Allah's side that He's like, no, this you cannot evade. It will happen to you. But then there are other things that you can pray your way out of. You can make enough good deeds to be like, that's not going to come anyway because you safeguarded yourself, right? But that's not to say that you're going to be single forever because that person just isn't looking in your direction because he's too blind by BBL baddies or something. I don't know. Because clearly, if he's not seeing you, his loss, sis, his loss. And I know this for a fact, his loss. Okay. So let him get the stinky BBLs. I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I need to just control myself here. The BBL smell, I don't know, I'm clearly chronically online. Um, wow, I distracted myself. So here's the thing, that doesn't mean that you will never then get married. There will never be another person who can make you fall in love again or anything. Allah's already got you. Stop it. Allah's got you. Allah knew that this person could be the right one for you, but also knew that that person wasn't going to choose you. So he already made sure that there was another person waiting. But what you have to do in order to get to that person is also surrender to Allah's will and trust in Allah's plan for you. Okay, that's what you have to do. And that is your part of the promise, saying, I am so ready for marriage. I'm so ready not to be single anymore. I'm so ready for that partner that if Allah is, if that person's not coming and I've made the dua and Allah's still not bringing me that person, clearly maybe I need to sort of surrender some things and, broaden my horizon. Make it easier for Allah to introduce some other people who might be better for me, if that is what is written for me. But we're the ones who can block that. Only us. We're the only ones who can get in the way of that by being so stuck on only what we want and not surrendering to Allah's plan for us. Okay. So those are the things that I wanted to say today. And I hope that there was something beneficial for you here. Maybe some aha moments, maybe like a little light bulbs. Maybe you got a little triggered. And if you got triggered during this episode, I would actually invite you to sit with that for a minute. Why was it triggering to you? What was the truth that I was hitting on that triggered it for you? What was the thing in you that you have not worked on yet, or that you have not sat with yet, that could make me trigger it? Because triggering, and listen, I've said this before, I can't remember where, probably in a podcast episode, maybe over on TikTok, I have no clue. But triggering is because when you're triggered by something, it's because you have something in you that you haven't faced. So maybe it's time to face that. Maybe it's time to sit with that. Because listen, I'm a triggering person. A trigger. Ooh, I trigger people. I trigger everyone. And maybe today was your turn. So I would invite you to actually be like, oh, I wonder why that was so triggering for me to hear. Reach out. If that is the case and you're like, I'm wondering what it is, reach out. Book a one-on-one call with me. Let's figure it out. Let's work on it. I'm a really nice person. I'm triggering, but I'm a really nice person. I'm good at my job. All right, my darling. I'm going to end this episode here. Just remember that there are limitations to the dua. The dua is not enough. It is not that Allah is limited. It is that we have been given limited access to infinite power, even though he has given us a very powerful tool that is the dua. All right, my darling, I hope you're going to have an amazing rest of your day, evening, whenever it is that you're listening to this episode. Please don't forget to rate and review this show. It does help. And one more thing, actually, if you wouldn't mind and you're still here, please share this podcast. Share it on your social media, share it with people that you know. I'm getting close to 1,000 followers or subscribers or whatever you call it over on Spotify. I'm really excited about that. Thank you guys so much. And nearly 30,000 downloads and listens. I'm so excited about that. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. It really means the world to me. I love this podcast. I love sitting down and recording episodes for you. So, the best way to show your support, I do this for free. I'm not getting any money anywhere from doing this. So it's all just from passion. Maybe one day I'll be able to take sponsorships and whatever, but at this point it is all free and I just love it. I really do. So I'd love to see your support by helping me reach more people. And if you can do that by sharing the podcast, I would be forever and eternally grateful to you. So that is where I'll leave today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me in another episode this week. I will see you, inshallah, on Monday. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.